Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. So a lot of people ask me this question, Abhishek, how do you keep yourself up to date? How do you learn real-time scenarios and use cases? Because when we work full-time for a company, we find it almost impossible. Now, whenever someone asks me this question, I just tell them I read a lot of documentation, but the big question is, what kind of documentation? That is what I am going to explain in today's video. Now, this is going to be set of free resources. So if you're interested, make sure you watch this video till the end. Let's get started. First of all, I totally agree. When you work full time in a company, your knowledge is limited to what is implemented in the company. Especially if you're working for companies that do not operate at scale, that's a real challenge for you because you will not be aware how systems operate at scale. You will not be aware the issues that you face when operating at scale and how to fix those issues. And when you try to look out opportunities like in product based companies or top companies, you will fail to clear the interviews or you will fail to keep yourself up to date. Now, the same thing happened with me. I started my career with TCS. Then I worked for a small company called Modelin. During this time, I realized I was not learning good enough to be in the top 1% engineering. Now, obviously, I cannot implement something new in the company, but I wanted to learn the real time use cases of companies which operate at huge scale. That is when I realized there is something called engineering blocks. Actually, there is a small story that I want to tell you here. So, I was on a trip. I was using Airbnb to book a hotel. And that time, I was thinking, now how Airbnb does this? One single application that is running all over the world. It has millions of hotels. It has millions of user database, but still operating without any downtime and operating in a very robust way. Now I was thinking about it. I started to search around it, and then I found Airbnb engineering blocks. So, what are these engineering blocks? If you are completely new to this term, very simple. Top companies. It's not one or two companies. I'll show you the resources as well. A lot of companies which are good at engineering, they share something called engineering blocks, where they share how do they operate at scale, what challenges they face when operating at scale, why did their system go down, and how did they fix the system and put it back to the normal state. And while discussing all of these things, they talk about a lot of tools that they used, how did they create clusters, how did they manage the database, everything that you need, not just to clear the interviews, but also to keep yourself up to date. And these are very, very practical guides. Of course, they don't give you the labs, but they give you enough information for you to understand what exactly happened. Now, there is a simple catch here. There are a lot of engineering blogs. As I told you, top companies publish their blogs, but you cannot spend a lot of time reading all those engineering blogs. You need 10 to 15 engineering blogs that you can follow, that you can bookmark and read on a constant basis. That is what I am going to help you with in today's video. I'll share you top 10 engineering blogs according to me. Today I'm a content creator. I have a lot of time and I spend a lot of time reading engineering blogs on the internet. But you might not be able to do it because you work full time for companies. You can follow these 10 engineering blogs that I personally found very, very knowledgeable. This is the first one, Airbnb tech blog, something that I also started with. They're actually engineering blogs, but Airbnb calls it tech blog. Anyways, you can find a lot of articles here, especially if you are into DevOps and cloud. You will love Airbnb engineering blog because they talk a lot about Kubernetes real-time scenarios. For example, this one here, seamless Istio upgrades at scale. Now tell me something. You can learn about Istio by going through their official documentation or by watching my videos on Istio or service mesh. But how will you understand what are real-time challenges while upgrading Istio on a 100 nodes Kubernetes cluster? Definitely you cannot do that because you cannot find videos on it. It's practically impossible. This is where the engineering blocks can help you. So here Airbnb talks about what were their challenges when they tried to upgrade Istio, what is their Istio architecture. See, these companies are open enough to disclose their Istio configuration as well. And eventually, how did they figure out the upgrade process? What tools did they use to complete the upgrade process? And a detailed conclusion. So this is how engineering blocks are written. Not only this one, as I told you, you will find a lot of information. For example, this one here talks about dynamic Kubernetes cluster scaling at Airbnb. Imagine the scale once again. So Airbnb is across the world. They have millions of users database. So their Kubernetes cluster must be with hundreds of nodes. How did they perform dynamic scaling? How do they do it even today? That is explained in this article. Now the next one is Netflix tech blog. My recommendation here, basically what I tried to do, instead of choosing another engineering blog in the same domain, I tried to choose 10 different engineering blogs, each in a different domain, so that you don't feel the information is repetitive and you also gain information of real-time scaling in different domains. Anyways, so this is Netflix tech blog. So similarly, even here you can find how temporal powers reliable cloud operations at Netflix. If you are into DevOps and cloud, you should definitely read this. Also, Netflix talks about the internal architecture, 100 times faster, how we supercharged Netflix Mastro's workflow engine, empowering Netflix engineers with incident management. Lot of times you are asked this question. I'm pretty sure when you try to attend an interview on DevOps or SRE, the first question they ask you is, how do you handle P0 incidents? What is your incident management process? If you don't have incident management process in your organization, you can go through Netflix incident management process. You can understand how top companies implement it. Either you can recommend it in your company or at least in your interviews, you can talk about, I know this incident management process and this is how I would do it. Perfect. The next one, something that I recently started reading is OpenAI engineering blogs. See, the first one that I recommended for you is Airbnb. Second one is Netflix, two different domains. Now the third one is OpenAI. Reason why I started reading OpenAI engineering blogs, actually they just started last year, and why I started reading it, because of the scale of the users. Today OpenAI has millions of users across the globe, even more than that. Recently they published an interesting article, scaling Postgres SQL to 800 million ChatGPT users. Now this was a very insightful article where they published how do they use Postgres, how are they scaling the Postgres cluster, how did they implement sharding, everything in detail. What can you expect more when companies like OpenAI publishing their entire database management and entire database architecture, including how are they running Postgres on a Kubernetes cluster. So you can see here, they are operating Postgres on a Kubernetes cluster. Even that information is shared with you. The next one that I would recommend is GitHub engineering blogs. Again, they have a massive scale in a different domain. So when it comes to GitHub engineering blocks, you might not find a lot about DevOps and cloud, but you can find a lot about the security aspect. For example, engineering blogs around SSH access, which is very important for GitHub. The next one that I would recommend you is Cloudflare. Cloudflare is the king in the security domain. 20% of the internet uses Cloudflare. I would again recommend Cloudflare engineering blogs so that you understand more about DDoS attack prevention, Cloudflare's bot management system, and how Cloudflare is securing 20% of the internet. Even they write very detailed articles. The next one, Uber. I'll be very honest. Sometime back, it used to be my favorite, and I used to spend a lot of time reading Uber engineering blogs. One reason for it is because of their consistency. If you look at Airbnb engineering blogs, they typically publish one in a month, but Uber engineering blogs, their frequency is quite high. You can see here 16 January, 13 January, 6 January, literally they started publishing once in a week. So because of this, it's useful. You can learn one concept in a week, and that concept you can learn in terms of scale and also in terms of real-time scenarios. Especially if you're into data engineering, I would highly recommend Uber's engineering blogs. Stripe, complete different domain. I intentionally chose it so that you also get some understanding of how transaction management systems work. Once again, if you observe carefully, each and every engineering block that I picked here are from different domains. So you can find, interesting blogs on how Stripe's document databases supported 99.999 uptime. So if you're interested in non-relational databases or frameworks that can help you with near real-time transactions, I would recommend you Stripe blogs. And they also publish articles related to machine learning. Now, how can I ignore Google? Google, they have billions of users. They also publish engineering blogs. Recently, they started publishing a lot of blogs around AI. For example, how Google SRE use Gemini CLI to solve real-world outages. Where can you find these kind of articles? Companies like Google sharing the information of how engineers in Google are actually using AI in their day-to-day DevOps and SRE activities. You can find that only in the engineering blogs. The next one is Anthropic. Of course, Anthropic publish very less about DevOps and cloud. Their focus is more on AI. Their focus is more on how Cloud Code can help the developers, how they identified issues related to it, and how they started fixing issues related to it. So only if you are into AI and development, you can go into Cloud engineering blocks. And finally, AWS architecture blog, which is an engineering blog, but the major focus is on the architecture. Something like how Salesforce migrated from cluster autoscaler to Carpenter across their fleet of 1000 EKS clusters. So you can learn what is the process of migration from cluster autoscaler to Carpenter, not on a single cluster, but on 1000 EKS clusters. They also talk about observability, they talk about SRE, they talk about API gateway, typically every AWS resource. So if you are into cloud engineering, what else is the best source? You can learn from AWS themselves. So these are 10 engineering blogs that I would recommend everyone. I tried my best to pick up engineering blog from one from each domain so that you can gain more knowledge than reading the same engineering blogs in the same domain. So I'll share all these links in the description. After watching this video, you can bookmark these links and go through them whenever you have time. I hope you found this video insightful. See you all in the next video. Take care.